All right, everybody. So this is Chris with Drop Dice. What I was planning on tonight was doing a live hangout with kind of brainstorming what's going on with the world I'm creating and talking about those races that I was coming up with. This hangout is live and open for anybody who wants to join. I've seeded it in a couple groups. So far, I don't have any guests, but that's all right. We'll kind of just continue from here, and if I end up not getting anybody on the broadcast, it'll be just for people who tune into the channel and they can see what I've come up with and provide their content on there. If we do happen to have some people that jump in on the conversation, I've got the QA app or the Q&A application up as well, just in case anybody wants to contact us through that or contact me through that means. Let me just post in one more group here because I think there's one group that I left off my list. All right. All right. And thank you for your patience. I just wanted to go ahead and get that out there, see if we can maybe get somebody else to join here, because it's always nice to have other people's opinions and thoughts on different matters. So, all right. Excuse me. All right, guys, I'm back. So basically with the idea with this custom world is to create some content that is specific to the world that I'm generating. Let's kind of start with just kind of a recap real quick of what I am talking about. Let me show you the map. This is the quick no cities listed version of the map here of what I'm calling Flood World, for lack of a better term right now. So here we go. All right, so in this one, this is the one we saw inside my last World Builder video where we have the lakes and the rivers, and I kind of explained why those things are happening. If you guys remember correctly, there's a couple major cities that have been planted on the map, and those ones aren't showing on here just yet because I haven't finished deciding on where I want to place those cities. Again, those are my major economic hubs, so it doesn't really matter who lives there. The next step is going to be to decide who lives on this planet in general. Now, I mentioned that I am interested in doing something involving the idea of like a excuse me, of doing a essentially a having witches in the world, or hags as D&D calls them, that kidnap children and turn them into halflings from magical means, and then they would evolve into their own race from there. So when setting up our races, I'd like to kind of talk about our big list, if you will. So in this big list, we're going to have a couple of archetypes, and they're going to go as follows. Usually when you look at most RPGs, your races will break down into these broad strokes. And so since these races are generally going to be more customized, I may not have, let's say, gnomes in my world, and instead I have something that fills the void that gnomes create. There's usually about 11 archetypes that do show up in most games. Let me post it here in the chat for anybody who comes along and wants to look at it. And then from there, I'll go ahead and start talking to you guys about it. All right, so the list is number 1, the Beautiful. For 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, this would be the elves. And when I say beautiful, I don't mean just their physical attributes. Of course, the game always contributes elves in most every game system. Elves are contributed to beauty, arts, and things like that. Leisure, study, things like that. Finding beauty in the natural world. That's what elves kind of fill in there. Now, the other one that I've got on this list here that's going to look pretty familiar for D&D is the conservative tough guy. The conservative tough guy in iconic 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is your dwarf. Essentially, they come from a conservative culture. They are tough guys, but they have a very kind of strictish, not super strict in most cases, culture. There's someone who goes a little stricter, and we'll get to them in just a second here. The third type is called the social. The social is a race of creatures that they are socially driven. In classic D&D, that's your halflings. They're the race that is constantly out there. They're usually talkative. They typically fill voids in like class systems. They usually go for things like rogues and such not, because they have charisma to support that, bards, and that's just mechanically how it comes about. We're not going to worry about mechanics just yet. What I'd like to focus on is the archetypes and what I'm thinking about inside of it. And hopefully we can get a couple more people in here, because I would like to get some ideas from some other people. Let's take a look here. So the next one would be the Marshal. That's number 4 on the list. The Marshal is like the conservative tough. It comes from a very regimented society. However, it kind of takes it to the next logical step. It's more of a society that is based upon knighthood and things like that. In some D&D games, this happens to be your humans. Usually the Marshal kind of gets filled out from the story, not necessarily your classic iconics. In some settings, you have militaristic elves, whereas one culture of elves may be considered the beautiful race. Another culture of elves may be considered the martial race. For 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, it could either be the humans, which they're kind of flexible and they can fill all these voids, but humans kind of typically fall into that category because of the way humans act. Or the drow is kind of the major notion on that one. They have a very systematic hierarchy in society. They follow rules. It's very regimented. A lot of lawful evil type things fall into this category. Lawful good races do too. However, you tend to see more lawful evil races just in general. So the next one up here is the Savage. The Savage is like your half-orc in 5th edition. Essentially, it is a race of beings that don't quite fit with society. They're more like tribesmen. They generally aren't very good with technology as a whole. They may be seen as a savage by someone who's more civilized. In other games, you get stuff like goblins. Goblins tend to fall into this savage category as well. Next is number 6, the little guy. This is my least favorite archetype, because often it is chosen because we need a little guy. There's not really a purpose behind the little guy besides he's a small character, and it gives you the statistical advantage of being small. Halflings are kind of my big thing on this one, because in most game systems, halflings are not really treated worth any sort of care. They kind of get a description that's like they're like more social humans, but smaller, and that's pretty much what their description says. You do get some game systems that have things like Kinder and Dragonlance that they go into a lot more detail, and they kind of take it up a notch as far as how the social works, and then they make them all like thieves and stuff like that, and that's neat, but it still kind of feels like you're reaching to kind of develop a purpose for your halflings. In my game system right now, because I'm thinking about having the hags curse the halflings, you would think that that's my little guy race. But right now, I haven't decided that they're going to be the little guy race. I think they should actually fall into a different category, which I'll talk about here in just a little bit. So keep in mind the little guy. Next up, number 7 is the Big Clumsy Guy. This is kind of the opposite. You see a lot of these in games, and a lot of players tend to like these races. If you have a game system, I believe Iron Kingdoms did it, where you have like a half ogre or something that is kind of a low intelligence or low wisdom, probably a lower charisma involved too, just as a general, and they happen to be big and strong. Usually they have the large size. For the game that's coming up in Jarl GM's channel, I'm playing a half giant. and that happens to be the big guy of that setting. So it's interesting, and some of these categories do bleed into each other because, for example, in Jarl DM's half giants, they are the big clumsy guy, not necessarily clumsy because of the way that this culture is viewed, but they're in part the big clumsy guy. They are also kind of our next one, the artificial, something that's created, something that's foreign, alien to the world. I'm sorry, not alien, but artificial is kind of the best way to put it. Um, they're created. With Viking mythology, giants are part of the hierarchy somewhere near the gods, essentially. And the gods protect man from the giants. And so they're kind of a foreign concept, and people don't understand how they're born. Like, you get the mythos, and you know that giants are born and that half giants are born, but it's not really something that humans understand. And so they're both big and slightly artificial in that game. A more direct example of artificial that people will get right away is Warforged. Usually artificial creatures have little understanding of human emotions. Changelings in Eberron would also be a good example. Changelings, because they are so distantly removed from the races that they emulate, is kind of the best way to put that. The next one on the list is the alien. This is why I had to distinguish the two, the artificial and the alien, because the alien is purely unknown. The best example I can think of as far as just weird, strange, and unique to the setting is in Dark Sun. They've got this weird ant giant humanoid thing. I forget what it's called. I think it starts with a Z or something like that, and you guys can look it up when you get a chance. But essentially, their thing is they're super weird. Technology doesn't work the same way for them. For them to hold weapons, they have to have customized upgrades. They have to have special weapons that are specifically designed for them. Not every game system includes an alien archetype inside there, but it is definitely something that you can consider inside your games to give you kind of this one race that is totally separate for some unknown reason. The next one up here is the Cursed Threat. This is where I think my halflings are going to fall. The Cursed Threat comes up in races like something like shifters in previous editions. Essentially, they're not really lycanthropes, but they have the ability to kind of shift partially to a lycanthropic state. Essentially, they carry a curse. Maybe the moon makes them mad, or they need blood, or they're dampier. Those are cursed threats. Something that people will perceive as a threat and fear, and they still live a cursed life. In fact, I actually have to change what I said. In Lloyd's game, the giants are probably somewhere between the big clumsy guy and the cursed, because they're feared without understanding inside his world. There's bigger cities that might accept us, but most of the smaller cities are probably going to bar us from entering because we have two giants in our party, or half giants in our party. So it's almost like we're bringing a war band down on their city. And the curse threat should be something that can be worked out in play. Don't just damn your player for choosing something that logically, according to the world, should be a damned race. For example, let's say you play a Dampier and you go the whole blade trope on it. You start off, you start doing good, and you grow like people know who your name is and what you do. And that's actually going to help you with reputation and things like that. If you get known as a monster hunter who helps children, chances are after about a year of doing that, people are going to start to welcome you a little bit more. And even more so if you do it in one town. So that's a pretty good opportunity for you to play something that's a little different. I mentioned Drizzt. I don't really care for him. Drizzt, in his original incarnation of what he was to begin with, being a drow that becomes good, that's kind of a cursed threat idea. Number 11 is the Mystic. The Mystic is kind of a cool one. It's usually the ones that are at peace with the world. They often feel detached, and that's usually kind of the trope that they go for. It's a detached, peaceful race that doesn't bother anyone, just generically, and they they usually have stuff like higher wisdom, like the intelligence side of the house, wisdom, intelligence, charisma, all those mental stats. They tend to have those a little higher to kind of reflect this idea that they go for inner peace, not necessarily martial prowess. They usually end up on the opposite end of the spectrum from your martial archetype. They believe usually in more of an equality sense, not necessarily a hierarchy, or sometimes they do have a hierarchy, but it's based in meritocracy, which is part of governments, which we'll talk about in another video, but it is something to consider. Basic definition of meritocracy, if you haven't looked at the DMG or you just don't know that, it's a society that is based upon merit. So what you do in society will garner you a place in society. There's quite a few civilizations that use that before the invention of kings and land ownership. So it's not terribly foreign. So you can definitely play with that. And there are some cities that had landowners and things like that, but it was still a meritocracy. And I don't mean like they're voted in power purely upon their merits. It's more like, in most cases, it's a respect thing. Like, I've garnered enough respect and people trust me enough that they don't say anything when I take charge. And then eventually it's just I take charge of everyone around me and I lead. And people don't question it because they understand my judgment has been good in the past. That's usually kind of the broad strokes of what a meritocracy is. There are other ones that are set up on the kind of frivolous ranking systems, like a meritocracy that could be based upon like intelligence scores to represent an intelligence society that views that the person who is the smartest should be in charge. So they administer an IQ test, that sort of thing. So there are kind of our archetypes, and I'd like to begin there. Let me just take a look, see if I've got any announcements from anybody, to see if we've got anybody who's planning on coming before I get too much further. All right, so unfortunately, it doesn't look like I've got anybody who's lining up to go just yet. I know there's a couple games going tonight, and that may be why I'm just a little dry on people today. If this doesn't work out and I decide that I need to brainstorm something else, I'll go ahead and try a different day and see if that works a little better for people. Just like this time, I'm going to post it a day ahead of time. That way people have some... I'm sorry about that. I know it pops every time I have to turn it back on. For whatever reason, if I don't have someone talking to me and it doesn't register the speakers on my end, it tends to turn itself off unless it's plugged in. I accidentally knocked that out before the start of this broadcast. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of talk about it here. So I mentioned that I don't want to use all of the races from the PHB. I'm okay with using some of them, or using the idea of them and changing it a little bit. The one that I'm okay with using straight out of the book is humans. Humans, by definition, are super diverse, and I can pretty much do anything I want with humans. If I wanted to put them in a different category and say, hey, they're the big clumsy guys of my world, I could do that. It'd be a little bit challenging for people playing humans because it's so different than what they expect. If I was to say that there was a 12th archetype, it would just be called human, to kind of show that there's a race out there that can fit pretty much everything. But I'm not going to create a broad archetype like that. So what I'm going to do is just write a special note over here that says humans are going to be just normal out of the book. Okay. All right, and we mentioned that we want to have hags. I don't think I want to have hags as players, but I don't know. It seems like it could be interesting if I created a watered down version of like what's in the monster manual. Like maybe you say that instead of being like this monstrous race, they're mutations upon a normal race. Like maybe it's just a template that I can apply to other races, and it twists them and it gives them a little bit of power. Like I don't want to say the feat from 5th edition that allows you to cast a first level spell, because that might be too powerful. But maybe with this template, it's like you pick a race that's common in the world, and then you get to add like a cantrip or something like that. You get one cantrip that you can use once a day as a spell like ability, which is kind of a carryover from previous editions. I'd have to play with it, but maybe some very minor magic. If I remember right, there are some races like the the gnome that has abilities like what I'm talking about. Let me bust open our little Bible here real quick. Let me look at the gnome. Yeah, the gnome has, let's see, Forest Gnome has Natural Illusionist. You know the Minor Illusion cantrip. And let's see, your intelligence is your spell casting ability for it. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like there are ways inside the system to go ahead and add some magic to the base race. So this actually might not be a bad idea to create it as like a template. Now, keeping that in mind, I may want to restrict some of my races, because if I have a race that's like the Dragonborn that are from the book that have the ability to breathe fire and have resistances, and they're kind of a strong class. They're they're kind of your Marshal guys inside this world. They come from a fallen empire. They have kind of a structured understanding of how their society works. Like if you look at Eberron, the dragon houses are big. The dragon mark houses are big. You can carry over that kind of an influence over to your dragonborn, which is kind of a neat way. And I've looked at that before, to have this idea of having a house that's very structured for dragonborn, and it does kind of fit the feel of what's in the book. So you can definitely look at that. So I may want to ban certain races and just say they just lack the ability to turn into hags. If you do get a chance to view this, it looks like I've got one viewer now. If you have an opinion about creating a hag template, just let me know here, and then we'll take a look at that and see how it could be done. Now, the other thing that I'm taking a look at here is, so actually, hold on a sec. Let me write that down real quick here. Hag template. All right, and then we mentioned that I want the halflings to be my cursed threat. I don't like them in the small guy, the little guy category. I don't care for that. I feel like it's kind of a cop out, and so I may even just avoid it. You don't have to have all of these 11 different items for archetypes. You could just pick 5 of them and only have 5 races in your world. It's totally up to you. But I generally don't like halflings, so my idea is that I was going to create halflings that I liked their story and I could use them. And that was part of the reason why I decided that halflings are going to be cursed. So with that, we talked about their history being that they were originally started because hags were stealing children from humans and turning them into these forever dwarfed, if for lack of a better term, humans, and which eventually caused them to breed with each other because they were ostracized, and they would actually outlive their parents, which is kind of a weird thing for that first generation of halflings. And it depends on how long I want to set this game. I want to make them like probably not too far long ago that they've been created, because then I can still keep this aspect of people fear them. They're almost like boogeymen, kind of. But there's still a level of understanding, kind of like I was talking about with the giants. I want to have it to where you can go to a bigger city and be accepted as a halfling, but in smaller cities, people are going to keep their children away from you. They're going to be concerned with your presence at all times. And I think that's probably going to be the best way to go about that, to kind of show that they are that cursed threat. The best part about this cursed threat is it doesn't have to actually be a literal threat. It could just be a veiled or perceived threat. So that's definitely something to think about. So with that, let me see here. I have knocked out my humans, my catch-all, my hags, which are going to be a template, and I want to say my hags are going to be alien. I want them to have almost an ingrained feel of the warlock. Like some of the really cool things about the warlock, like having the pact and all that, should come with that hag template. Like I said, it's not going to be powerful, and you may want to combine, let's say, a hag with the warlock. That way you can, like, not only did you get your hag powers from your patron, you've now sworn your life to your patron, and he's giving you powers in return. And so that might be kind of an interesting angle for people to play. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and start at the top here, the beautiful. Now the beautiful, I'm not really sure what exactly I'm going to do with them just yet. My original thought is we can do something akin to elves without necessarily being elves. Keep that idea of the culture and the arts being important to them as a general. So let's see here. One of the best tools ever for any sort of custom work is Google. So let me whip that out real quick here. I mentioned it before. I don't know if it's the same viewer that came back or if it's a new viewer. We do have the Q&A open right now. If you do happen to be part of one of my groups, you can actually just jump right into the conversation and brainstorm with me if that's a little easier for you. Let's take a look here at some fantasy races via Google. All right. All right, so here is my Google screen. All I did literally is inside the search bar, I just typed in fantasy races. For this, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of an artistic guy. I like going over to the image search and just taking a look and seeing what I've got here. So let me take a look. What is this big list here? Okay, so this is more of like a 3D picture of kind of your common fantasy creatures. Okay, I actually kind of like this guy. This kind of a lupine looking guy in the background here. Maybe that's an idea for maybe one of my big creatures. This looks like an odd group here. Okay, this is more Final Fantasy art, it looks like. So you've got kind of, again, another kind of lupine looking thing, some sort of short race here. This could be something akin to your elf, especially like your wood elf, because it's got that kind of feral nature to it. And this is pretty much what I do for inspiration as I kind of come down the list. Now, let me see if I can find something that stands out or seems really cool to me. We're going to go with Gungans. No, I'm kidding. It's ridiculous. I can't believe they added them in the first place. All right. Oh, man, these are weird. Some sort of weird bird things, but don't fly. I like that, actually. Let's do that. We can call them the Garuda. How about that? That gives them kind of an influence that people will recognize by name, and that'll definitely kind of help out. So it looks like I have somebody just popping in. If you want to introduce yourself, you can, Miss Chelsea.
Oh, hey, sorry.
Hey, no problem.
Chelsea. It sounded interesting, so I wanted to listen in.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how far you've been along. Essentially, I was kind of talking about the different archetypes that you find in
I just
different
came in
adventures.
and you pulled up the picture of the birds.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not going to go over the full list. We'll kind of work through it as we go along here. But so essentially right now I'm looking for a race that will be my beautiful, peaceful race that values the beauty of land and culture and things like that. Typically in 5th edition, that would be your elves, your high elves specifically. And so that kind of gives you an idea of where we're going with this. And because I'm talking about custom content that's going to be for the world that I'm building on the channel, I wanted to have some unique things inside there. I don't want to go to the extreme of the, I'm going to screw up their name, Elemental Evil, the Flying Birdmen, Coca or something like that. I can't even say their name, but the Birdmen.
I'm horrible at it too.
I don't want to go to that extreme because I feel like flying in 5th edition is so hugely important. It's such a handy thing to have that I don't know that I want to start my players with that ability because it may make one race more superior to the others. But what I was saying is I actually kind of like these bird people here. Let me just write them down because I decided we were going to call them Garuda. Kind of give people a good idea of what I'm talking about. And of course, I'm going to save this real quick. Just drop it in my folder here. All right, so let me kind of go back down the list. Like I said, I don't know where you came in. So we've got the beautiful race that I kind of picked out here. And if you have any inputs or suggestions, you can go ahead and interject. If you think my birds are terrible, let me know.
No, I love the birds, actually. I really like the idea of the birds. I'm looking at them and like character ideas are popping in my head.
Well, I think the thing that I like about this picture is just the variation of birds you have here. And I think that's one of the draw points that kind of took me to this picture, is the idea that you can have so much variation with them.
And customization, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking since they're going to be the beautiful race, they're going to pride themselves on like their plumage, and it's going to be like a talking point amongst their culture.
Oh, and it makes sense for birds too. That's perfect.
Yeah. So the next one on the list is the conservative tough guy. This is kind of your dwarves. In traditional D&D, they typically have a conservative culture, and they generally are kind of rough and tough guys. They're the ones that you won't see crying unless it's like dire situations, that sort of thing. Do you have a suggestion or a picture that you think would be kind of cool to see a race like?
Like a specific race from D&D, or just like a concept?
No, anything you want. It's a concept. If you don't even have a picture for it, I like pictures just because that's the way I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you don't have a picture for it, totally fine. What I ended up doing is I just Googled fantasy races just to pull up kind of a wide array of pictures. And then I was looking at stuff like this where you can kind of see this arrangement of different people in the row here.
Right. I think going for some kind of like something that would make sense as far as like you go for birds and plumage for beautiful. If you go for like a stone type figures, they don't even have to be humanoid. They could be like, you know, animated stones of any kind of shape and variety, which would be kind of cool. Represent their personalities.
Okay, so some sort of stone creature. Yeah, I'm kind of digging on that. Let me see what we can find here. I'm just going to kind of browse real quick here and see if there's anything. If you want to pull up some stuff and throw me a link if you find something, that'll work too.
Let me just finish shoving my sandwich in my face.
Not a problem. I didn't mean to introduce you earlier than you were ready.
Do you see that guy? You passed him just a little bit ago. He kind of looked a bit like a walrus. Up a little bit more, right there. Top left. Yeah, that guy. If he was made out of stone, that's what I have kind of pictured in my head, like an orc but made out of stone.
Okay.
Kind of rounded and large, but you know.
Okay, that's not bad.
But that's just the first idea off the top of my head.
Let's kind of save this for a second because I do want to double back and mention the other archetypes. Because I think when I tell you the other archetypes, you might think he fits somewhere else. Because I like the race picture. So the other archetypes, I threw them up on the chat before. Let me throw them back in the chat here. The one that's not listed is humans, because humans are going to be my generic catch-all race anyways. I think they fit as kind of a multifunction race.
Big and clumsy.
I was going to say one of those categories is the big and clumsy guy. And then there's also the savage, which, I mean, look at the spear he's carrying here. And like, I'm looking at the way they emoted the faces on some of these here, and it almost seems like they could fit in that savage category. The ones that are a little weird that you may not be familiar with are the artificial. That's kind of like Warforged. Basically, they are created. The alien is something completely foreign. If you've ever seen Dark Sun, they have an insectoid race that's just weird. They require special gear, special fittings of armor. That's your alien race.
I like that picture. You see that alien picture? If you look, not the top right, but the one over from the top right. Do you see that middle picture?
Yeah, that one. Right,
you see that person in the middle? That's interesting. For alien.
Kind of a fish-looking person. That actually would work perfect with the idea of having a flood world. Let's save that one. All right, so this was your call. What do you think we should call this one just to kind of start off?
Something with an N, something like Nerian or Nigerian or Nefarian, something like that.
I kind of like Nerian when you
Yeah.
mentioned that one. That kind of fits my structure that I have for the names of gods right now. They're usually a little bit like shorter words that have like just kind of a punch to them. So I think
Yeah,
that would
exactly.
work good. And so we're going to say that's our conservative tough guy.
You know who else she reminds me of? Fifth Element. You remember the movie Fifth Element?
Mm-hmm.
The alien that had the long headpiece that was like part of her body.
Right.
It reminds me heavily of that too.
Nerian. Okay. I think that's kind of cool, kind of a cool idea to have a semi-aquatic race inside the world. I don't know how aquatic I'm going to get because if I'm going to say that I don't want players flying, I probably don't want them to have the ability to freely swim. So they may be like maybe they're amphibious.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all I want to use out of this picture.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of ratlings in different games, and so I kind of want to stay away from that one. It's kind of funny to put rats in a world that's flooding, but I don't think that's going to be the trope I want to go for right away. Let's take a look here, see if anything else kind of pops out. The next one we have is the social. That is typically your halflings in D&D. It's your talkative race that that gets into trouble more often than not. And I'm thinking because a lot of times a lot of game designers usually make that a small race, and it's usually something to kind of cope with the fact that they're small in a world where people are generally bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want that trope, to be honest, because there's already the trope of the little guy, which is kind of my least favorite trope on the list. I don't like when a race is small just to be small, and that's how it feels about halflings and hobbits in general.
You mentioned social, and honestly, the thing that immediately pops to my head is wolf packs. They're built on social complexes and, hierarchies. And
yeah, that's a good call. Let's see if we can get something lupine or something close to that. I was actually mentioning lupine races before because I thought that they could be a good savage race just in general. Oh, I should mention my adult feature is not turned on Google, so sorry for anybody watching.
No, don't worry about it. Mine's always on. You lose all the good stuff.
I was going to say they generally tune out stuff that they don't need to tune out, which is always ridiculous to me. Oh, that's something different. The question I always have is with lupine characters, how lupine do you want to go? Is something like
do you want to go full dog?
I was going to say, do you want to go something like this, or do you want to go more humanoid look?
I was thinking more humanoid, just because it would make social a more acceptable idea. Because when you start getting into like straight wolf jowls talking, it makes less sense to me.
That's kind of where I'm thinking about it. There's a race called shifters that I believe are in Eberron. Essentially, they're very watered down versions of lycanthropes. They have the ability to like grow fangs and claws. I'm thinking something akin to that in a picture would be good. Like I'm thinking that getting too feral of a lupine kind of look to it is almost too far down that spectrum for being the social person.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm seeing if I can't find an idea of what I had in my head when I said lupine, but they just want to throw me lots of gnarly werewolves.
Try lycanthrope. See if we get anything good with that.
Lots of Skyrim.
I mean, even if I don't necessarily find an image, oh man, that would be cool for the alien one, but this guy looks like he's like a mutated rat in a werewolf body or something.
You go savage with that. That's kind of cool.
That's a little more human, but that's not quite it either.
Let's see. Let's
I'm
take
thinking
a
more
look.
like more like humanoid with some feline features, kind of a deal, or some sort of like animalistic features.
Oh, I have a good picture. I got a bit. Oh, hold on. I just found our picture of, I think, what we're both thinking right now. There we go. Check that out.
Let's
It's a
take a
really blurry
look
image,
here.
but that's kind of closer to what I had in my mind.
Yeah, and that has kind of a similar motif to what we've got with the aquatic race too, kind of a more gentle features,
Mm-hmm.
which could make them some sort of common ancestor or history too. Let me throw that in a folder here. And let's see for a social race. Now, if we can't think of a race name, I'm just going to put a descriptor in here. I want to come up with something good for this one, so I'm just going to put lupine because I'm not going to be able to think of something off the top of my head for this one, probably. And I mean, hey, that may end up being the race name anyways, because I like it when you can kind of instinctively know who you're talking to if somebody says a race.
Right, exactly.
So let's see here. The next one on the list is the Marshal. These are more your militants. The Drow in 5th edition fit that concept. Essentially, there's a hierarchy, and they're very strict about their hierarchy. And this, you could go for something like I'm trying to think if I want to go kind of your classic tropey way, which usually your Marshal are the race that's going to get into combat pretty often. Another good example would be Dragonborn. They're generally a combat flavored class, or excuse me, race. So originally I was kind of thinking some sort of like bulkier humanoid, not quite like large size, because we've still got that big clumsy guy category, but something a little bit more bulky.
I'm drawing a blank on that one.
That's fine. If we don't think of anything, we can come back to it. I just pulled up bugbears because I thought maybe somebody would have like a neat fan art or something on here that's an interesting idea on bugbears. Occasionally you see stuff like that, and that helps. Yeah, I don't see anything popping out right away. Totally fine. I planned for this to be about an hour, so I don't want to dwell on it too long.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't catch it, I slipped you another image to save for your lupines. It's a little bit better quality image.
Ooh, that's much better. Yeah, let me save that one. I actually like this one a lot better too, and it's got kind of an oriental feel, which is actually super cool for me.
Yeah, I liked it.
So this is kind of a neat image here. Let me... Okay, I'm on it already. Somebody did like a bugbear, but made it more humanoid-esque.
It kind of looks like a bat.
Yeah, it kind of does. I'm going to save it. I'm not sold on it yet, but that gives me something to kind of think about. Okay. Then the Savage. This one I think is going to be a fun one to pick out. Let me just do Savage Fantasy Race. Let's see what we get. Say this image would have been good for just kind of source gathering material here. We've got the bird people and everything in here. See, like, I love Guild Wars 2 because they came out with these guys, the Char, and they're so cool looking. But I don't necessarily want to use them directly.
Oh, that picture right there. Do you see the two men in the picture with the horns? Those would be good for militant.
Yeah,
Marshal.
something like that. It makes me think of your the tieflings, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because that does give players kind of an idea, and I can change around how their society is. Because right now the tieflings are kind of like jaded for 5th edition core, is the best way to put it. So that's definitely an idea.
And you don't have anything with horns yet. Ooh, those
Just want to
reminded
kind of take a look through here and see if there's anything else that kind of pops up. Of course, that's a tiny image and you can't really tell exactly what's going on there. Looks like that one I'm going to be a little limited on for now as well. Like I said, this is kind of a fact-finding thing. Let me put down a note for the Marshal, though, because we both kind of agreed that they should be kind of a more bulky, iconic look to them. All right. No, that's too extreme right there. I'd fall into that alien category. I'm trying to think. I probably have some other pictures floating around that probably would do some good too. I just wanted to have a kind of a talk with everybody about it, what they thought that they'd like to see, that sort of thing. And so right now we kind of got two that are kind of our bulky guys. We've got the Marshals and the Savages, and naturally their societies are going to have some dichotomy to it. Do we want to stress that, or do we want to take their relationship and put it somewhere else? Like maybe the Savages don't get along with the social lupine creatures.
I guess it depends on where you put them regionally, because usually regional conflicts are huge.
Well, right now I haven't decided on regions, and my process is to think about my races before I think about regions. That way I could think about things that I'd like to explore society-wise and then seat them where it makes sense for my story.
Right.
So I kind of go sideways instead of backwards or forwards on this one.
Gotcha.
Now, the little guy, I'm going to skip it. I'm just so irritated with the little guy.
I don't like them
generally
either.
don't want it.
I don't like the little people either.
They always feel like a cop-out.
Mm.
Let's see, the Big Clumsy Guy. I'm determined to have a large race, like legitimate large race inside the world. In Lloyd's game, Jarl GM, we're going to play half giants, and we're all large in that game. So we're going to see how it plays out. If they end up being way too powerful, I may have to change the Big Clumsy Guy to just a medium-sized creature.
Yeah,
But I'm thinking something like 10 feet tall that like they don't function in normal villages and stuff like that. And I'm not going to search for anything on that one because it's going to be something. It's going to be something that has to kind of charm me, because I feel like they got to have kind of a tough look, but like almost like an approachable face to them.
Yeah.
The Artifical may be kind of fun to do. I love the Warforged, but I don't think that's what I really want to go for, because inside the world, with the idea of having a fresh water around the world, purely by what the Warforged can do by the book, technically they can just walk to whatever country they wanted to and be fine. They really don't have to worry about rusting because that's part of their mechanics. It just doesn't seem like a good plan. Let's see here. Or I can get a lot of Stephen Hawking pictures. That's cool. I guess people think he's a robot.
I have this idea in my head, but I don't think I'd ever be able to find a picture for it.
Okay.
And if you can picture a shape of a human, but completely take away all features, and imagine that they, have these sharp, jutting crystal arms, legs, chests, and pieces, and they all kind of float together, and they're basically kept alive by magical means. They're animated through magic instead of gear works. So you would have kind of like these floating, not floating, not flying, floating, crystalline, figures of people. that's kind of an idea that popped into my head. But like I said, good luck finding a picture of that.
Yeah, I just typed in crystalline. What did I put in? Crystalline man, and it didn't quite come up. I know there's some stuff in like this right here.
No. Type in keyword Xerath. Xera. Yeah, Xerath. That's the closest like I could get you to an idea of what it would look like in my head.
Okay. Take a look at the screen. Is this what I'm looking for?
Yeah, close. Yeah, that's like an idea of Xerath, but yeah, it's close.
Okay.
So basically,
that's not a bad idea. Oh man, I can't believe I didn't even think about this. What you could have is, so there's definitely like this idea, which got me thinking, especially because of this picture. You could have stuff like an animated suit of armor that essentially is like a race in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. So like, not that it's like gears and stuff like that, but it's like some kind of magical thing that animates, the things around it to take shape.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Let me find one that kind of speaks to me here. What is this? Ooh, that's kind of cool.
It's like a steampunky version.
I'll throw that in the folder. I don't think that's going to be the one that I kind of use as my reference picture, but it's definitely worth throwing in there. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I'll put one of these in here too. I kind of like the one right here that I'm showing for it because it's so different from normal man that it's going to be alien and hard to figure out, but it's not going to be my completely alien race.
Yeah.
I mean, it may actually fill in that void because of what I'm looking at, and I may have to look for something else for the artificial, because chances are they're going to have like a strange anatomy that's just going to be weird for anybody to look at and try and figure out. So maybe they are the alien race, which is totally fine. Let's see. Down here, crystal people.
Crystal people.
All right. And the other one, I was going to say, you can see it on your list. I put the cursed threat halflings. So I hate halflings, so my goal is to use halflings in a way that I like. I don't know why I hate them. It's probably because they're your iconic small race and they have no purpose to be there besides I'm small.
Yeah.
So my idea was I was going to create a hag template, which was going to, this will actually probably be my artificial race. Essentially, you can pick another race and you can add the idea that you're a hag. You were turned into it by getting in contact with the Fey world. And basically, it's just going to give you something like a minor illusion spell, like a cantrip that you can use once a day, or something very small, like the forest gnomes. They get minor illusion as one of their racial abilities. I'll probably, in fact, use that exact same line as it is, just give them minor illusion. And the story that I want behind the halflings are that hags originally developed from jealous people that turned to the Fae for power when the gods kind of didn't pay attention to them. And so when they became hags, they got separated from the norm of society, and they got jealous because the norm of society moved forward and the hags had to stay in this kind of archaic type world. And so what they did is they stole people's children and cursed their children to become halflings, where they would live longer than humans, so the children would outlive their parents and never be able to grow up. And I want to make it fairly close to when that event started, so that my halflings still have this idea that they're cursed, and people just don't want them around because halflings may be there to steal your children for the hags. And so that's where I'm kind of thinking about that, which means that halflings are just not going to be welcomed anywhere.
Because we hate halflings, rah.
I was going to say that'll get some of my halfling hate out in a logical way for the game. But it'll be interesting if somebody decides to play a halfling and try and correct that stereotype.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Next, we have the mystics. Mystics are kind of your peaceful, we love everybody type people. um, they tend to be your monks and things like that. Um, which I like the idea of them being just generally racially speaking like a monk type people that turn to spirituality instead of necessarily combat.
It would be kind of cool if monk was less of a race and more of a culture, as in it's noticed as a race, but all kinds of races are them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking is like there should be like a monk culture within the world, and I think it will be mainly predominantly this mystic race who runs it, but they welcome all practitioners kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Let's take a look here. Since I mentioned Garuda earlier, I feel like it should be something like, I don't want to say like a Shiva because 4 arms could get tactically really good.
Yeah.
But maybe something kind of Indian inspired would be kind of cool. Let's see. Creature. Seems like a weird combination that might yield some good results.
You know one that never really gets used a lot? That's the lady with the elephant trunk nose. I mean, she's represented as Shiva with 4 arms, but you can drop the second set of arms and use that elephant feature, because nobody does that, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say this one kind of piqued my interest too. Kind of the Rhino Man.
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't want to go Magic the Gathering rocks on it or anything. Oh, here we go. This is what we needed for the Lupine. Just kind of this weird Darth Kitty thing going on. Oh, here we go. Use steal from Kung Fu Panda and have them be a bunch of turtles.
Oh, clearly, as we've learned from World of Warcraft, they should be pandas.
Yeah, of course. Kung Fu Panda edition.
Ooh, those things are cool.
Oh, what is that? I like that. I'm saving that for something.
Oh, it says an ant tesseridor. Tesseridor? Maybe you should type in that.
I was gonna say that's who the artist is, it looks like.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it said ant instead of by.
Oh, of course it's a Magic card, isn't it? They have some good artists, so I can't really knock it. It's just always sad when you discover that this awesome character picture you found is just a Magic card.
One of thousands.
Like people don't even remember what that card does, or you picked an image that's cool and it's for like this terrible card, and people are like, "Oh man, that's terrible." Here's something for an alien race. That's pretty weird.
Oh, vulture bird. That would be cool.
Kind of reminds me of the guys from Dark Crystal. Let's see. That's too close to undead, but that's not a bad look. That's not bad. That doesn't seem like overly imposing or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'll throw that in the folder for now. Yeah, I'm thinking that gives me kind of a good selection of different options here.
Yeah, it looks really cool so far, dude.
Now, let me go ahead and stop that side of the broadcast. All right, so I'm back over here. So that's basically what I do for custom races is I kind of pull some stuff and jot down some ideas and then leave it alone, honestly, for another day or two and let stuff stew. Other than that, the other thing I wanted to talk about, we are at that hour mark, so if you wanted to step out, this is what I planned on. If not, I am fine to go ahead and continue.
Oh, I mean, that's up to you. I was working on this when I
Oh,
came in.
no problem. So because you happen to be in that, that's perfect. What I was going to actually include as part of this conversation is, if you, I think you were in the group last night when we were talking about it, the idea of custom backgrounds, and we talked about having a political refugee or a political hostage. I've
I
already got
left right before that.
background. Okay. Well, we were talking about it, and I mentioned that in L5R, one of my favorite things that players can be is a political hostage. Essentially, you're a noble who was given to another noble family to ensure peace, and you have to maintain that peace, and anything you do could destroy it. So I thought of that as kind of an alternative noble background, and I want to probably have like probably 10 backgrounds in total, even if they're just kind of like a variant. Like the political hostage is going to be a variant of the noble. You're probably not going to have to change the noble all that much to make it. The refugee I created will probably be in the world. It depends on the setting if it makes sense. But like, is there anything that you haven't seen in 5th edition? Because I know that you've been reading through the player's handbook and everything that you would like to see as a background.
I know one. I actually can't tell you if it's in it or not.
Okay.
But I know one that I played in specifically from Pathfinder was an altered version. And it was the charlatan. I think somebody recommended it to me, and it was basically a rumor mongering, social aspect of the rogue. And I found that so interesting, and yet everybody downplays it.
I know which one you're talking about because I played a decent amount of Pathfinder. I used to work for Paizo when they first launched, so
nice.
so I've been with them since the beginning. But yeah, no, the charlatan is a good one. There actually is a charlatan background if you decide to play that in 5th edition as well.
Okay, cool.
But that does lead me to something that. No, I mean that does lead me to something that I've noticed that I would like to see. There's an archetype for the cleric in Pathfinder that nobody plays because it's kind of a ridiculous archetype called demagogue, where you are basically trying to get people to your side and you focus on speeches and things like that. And I think a demagogue version of like a variant on the acolyte would actually be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Where your job is to go around and preach the word and be in people's faces and try and persuade people to your side. So kind of a mix of the charlatan. Yeah, kind of a mix of the charlatan in with like the acolyte. And that one I think will probably have to be its own category. So let me write that down. Demagogue.
Let me pull out. Cody, do you know where the player's handbook is? Because I have the Dungeon Master's one in front of me right now. Let me close this. Let's see here. I went out and picked these up today. I'm very happy.
The DMG or both of them?
I picked up the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook today.
The DMG for 5th edition is probably one of the better ones that's been written in the last couple of years for a bunch of different systems. So it was definitely worth the investment.
I also picked up these.
I haven't gotten a set of story cubes, but I've heard that they're very good.
And these. Because I want to be prepared. Oh, goodness. You were actually talking about the hag earlier, and I always felt like that was something that was highly underused, mostly for the fact that it was a rare featured race or whatever in Pathfinder. Because I'm more familiar with Pathfinder, if you remember that when I'm talking. Is I always found the hag concept really interesting, but like most of the time they're like, "Oh, it's a really rare race. You're not really going to come across that." And I'm like, "But it's
that's why I was kind of thinking it should be a template. Like I want all the races to be able to have that option to become a hag, in addition to what they are. And so, like, I may have 2 players at the table that are both hags, but maybe one of them is a fighter, one of them happens to be a druid, and they're going to have a totally different outlook, and they may have different patrons and that sort of thing.
Right.
And like I said, make it kind of a really watered down version of like a Fey Pact.
Right. Let's see here. Let me flip down to. I gotta find archetypes in this damn book.
I was going to say it starts on 127 is where the acolyte is.
7. All right, let me get there.
We've got an acolyte, a charlatan, a criminal, entertainer, folk hero, the guild artisan, the hermit, the noble, outlander, sailor, soldier, urchin, and I know I didn't say it, but I probably passed it, the sage.
Hermit's a cool one. I like the idea of hermit.
The refugee, if you hadn't had a chance to look at it, it is kind of based on the hermit and the
Mm-hmm.
outlander kind of combined
Mm-hmm.
together
Mm-hmm.
to create kind of this unique concept of someone who is basically, you know, a vagabond, for lack of a better term. And you know what? That might not be a bad idea. Not necessarily refugee, but maybe tweak it a little bit differently. And instead, because we've got this idea of this flood world, there's probably some people that are going to be like caravan folk. So
Yeah.
maybe a traveler background,
Yeah.
which
Do they
could
have a?
be.
Let me look right here. Do they have a specific merchant type? Like
Yes, they do. They've got guild artisan,
Yeah. Well,
and then they've also got guild merchant, which is a variant of it.
okay. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that guild merchant doesn't really do justice to it, because guild merchant, when you read it and what it does, it kind of feels like they're more of like, when a player plays it, it's a traveling merchant, but when it's an NPC, they're probably going to be stationary
Yeah.
because they're part of a guild and they work within their guilds, and generally there's going to be multiple traders guilds within the world.
Is
So
there
I
a?
would think that the cool thing is doing like a traveler background is you could have them be kind of at odds with the guild
Mm-hmm.
instead, because they would be guildless as far
Or
as the
almost
guild is
like a
concerned.
smuggler.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the thought that popped in my head as we were talking about that. Something smuggler based, or
Yeah, and
well, to the merchants they would be smugglers. Uh,
exactly.
so that's really cool.
And
Um,
let me look here. So there is a sailor one, and there's also a pirate one. I think that's probably going to be good enough for the world.
mm-hmm.
Sailing is kind of a big thing in the world, so I wouldn't be surprised if I get a couple people that are interested in that one. But I don't think it necessarily needs like a third variant in here,
Yeah.
because there's.
There is a difference between like open ocean waters like sailing and pirating, and small
Mhm.
closed-in waters like you know what I'm trying to say, like rivers and swamps and stuff like that. And you could really come up with something really cool for us, like a swamp type area.
Yeah, and
Or
I
marsh.
haven't decided just yet if I'm going to have swamps in the world,
Mm-hmm.
because of the world having such unnatural geography to the way the Earth is.
Mm-hmm.
It may not even have it. It kind of depends on what I see from the map, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
But like a swamp dweller background, that might be kind of a fun idea. What's your background? Gator wrestler?
Gator wrestler, don't you know?
Let's
Got
take
me
a
that
look
gator.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I think those are pretty good. Let me think if there's anything else that's missing. Fortunately, there's a gentleman online, and I linked his stuff a little while back inside the one-shot group that he did probably about 5 or 10 archetypes that he put together. I'm trying not to repeat his because he's got some good ones like prostitute in there.
Oh, I just played one actually in
Um,
Pathfinder. It was really fun.
yeah, let me pull up his list because I want to make sure that I'm not going to repeat. Because if there's somebody who's got a content out there that's good, I have no problems just using their content. I gotta search for myself because we got so many posts inside the one-shot group over the last couple days. Here we go. It's from Hack and Slash blog on Blogspot. Let's see. He's got calligrapher, dock worker. That's a good one. I need to write that down. The dock worker from Hack and Slash. Okay. They've got brewer slash drunk. That's not bad.
And of course, you always have to have the reformed drunk.
So I don't see a traveler one just yet, but he does have Carney, which may be a kind of a jumping point for traveler.
Yeah.
Because I think Carney's too far down the line. Like, I don't want to be disrespectful to people that are travelers. Like, that's definitely a whole different breed. Let's take a look here. Gladiator is part of the list. With the world being kind of crummy half the year, Gladiator might not be bad either. Usually when you have like pre-heavy society type, like known society type worlds, they tend to have gladiatorial combat in one way or another.
Right.
Let's see, Fisherman. Let me add that to the list. That's another good one. This is a problem. Some people are genius and they jumped on this stuff quick. He does have a smuggler.
We kind of went down that path though when we talked about
say,
river people, and then the
yeah.
smuggler. Yes.
I was gonna say I can definitely add that to the list so I can read through it and see if it matches with the world. Because ultimately, I'm just kind of writing down what sounds good right now, and then I'm going to double back and read through stuff and see if anything sounds like it's too powerful or not powerful enough.
Right, right.
He's got feral on here, which I know why he did it, because if you look at the Outlander background, one of them is, yes, I was literally raised by wolves. Like this further expands on that idea of you just being a feral child. But I don't know if I necessarily want that to be an option for a player unless they specifically come to me with that request. Like that this is something special that they want to do, kind of a thing.
Right.
Let's see. Got a musician here. Winter Soldier. Let's see, what does this thing say? You once lived in life and now that's gone. Through sorcery or magic, you have chance. Everyone you knew is dead, and you live in a long distant time. That's actually kind of cool. I'll add it to the list and then I'll read through that, see if that's something I want to have in the world. I haven't decided on how I want to do life cycles and things like that, and if I want to have resurrection at all in the world. So that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it last night. I'm against resurrection unless it like can definitely play a specific role and there's consequences and all that.
Yeah, I liked it. I forgot who mentioned it, but they were mentioning the idea of adding a psychosis or one of the sanity features out of the DMG. I actually really liked that a lot. That applied a good, easy problem for the character to have from coming back.
Yeah, I forget who mentioned it first.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that we discussed it for quite a while, but I forget who mentioned it first. It was somebody who was newer, I think, in the group.
It wasn't the guy with the cowboy hat on, was it?
No, I don't think so.
No.
But yeah, I think I'll go that way, because I don't like necessarily telling people that there's no resurrection in the world, but that's kind of been my go-to for like the past couple of years, because I want death to have a cost. But I think the mention of doing it that way is going to tilt me in the favor of resurrection with heavy consequence.
Yeah.
Let's see. They've got the Bravo, which, from the sounds of it, he is basically just an asshole. Let me look at this thing real quick here. Oh no, I misread that part. They were talking about the people who complain about there not being enough mechanical benefits to archetypes. The Bravo is someone who helps out regardless of the cost. That's kind of cool. It's kind of like your classic adventurer type feel.
Right, right.
Oh man, he gets a lot of cool stuff as his equipment. Like, he gets a blunt weapon you have proficiency in, chain, clothing, crowbar, sledgehammer, holy symbol, potion of healing, stylish or dapper hat, a pet rat or snake. That's quite a bit of stuff in there. So let's add that. Ooh, I know one.
I really liked the prostitute idea. I wouldn't bypass it, actually, because you can do a lot of really cool play with that type.
Yeah, I've done a male prostitute in L5R, and they've got this because it's really like a geisha type society that also does prostitution. but
Mm-hmm.
you're a spy, and you get like weapons like blades inside scarves and fans and stuff like that. And
Right.
it's so funny because you get to use these little piddly weapons that people don't think about. All right, so those are the ones I have on the list now that I've gone through Hack and Slash's stuff. I know there's tons more online. Fontrodden actually just did a post where he pulled together a bunch of material. But one of the ones that I'm not seeing on here that I was kind of thinking about is, let me look at this real quick again, is a collector. Like have a background where like literally your life purpose is to collect things, and like your background when you roll on it for the roll charts, it's going to be like random selection of what you collect. It may be something as easy as like thimbles and coins to maybe you collect swords. Part of me is kind of going that direction because I'm thinking about that bird race. I think that I think
Yeah,
that totally fits them. Like have them just be a collector.
that's really good. That's really good.
I'm trying to think if any of the other ones kind of speak to me as something that sounds like it should come from like a racial point, like that Garuda Birdman collector idea. Let's see, the Nerian, our aquatic conservative tough guy. I guess it depends because there's the noble background, but they mention it in the DMG. There's a ton of different types of societies that you can have.
Yeah.
Like meritocracies, democracies, and things like that.
Right. Right.
If you play in a democratic society, being a noble is not necessarily something that's valuable. So maybe a politician would be kind of a good idea. Though you could say that the politician is already the charlatan.
Yeah. Yeah. It would almost be a mix between the two, a noble and a charlatan.
I was going to say, even the idea of doing the demagogue, like I talked about, would actually kind of fill that point too. So I don't want to double dip too much. So we'll leave that off the list.
Right. I see a lot of specialties like that you can go scholar with, so I don't know if you want to subdivide that out anymore. I'm guessing no.
Mm-hmm. Let me take a look at scholar and see how that one's fits. I think it kind of breaks itself down pretty well.
Yeah, it looks like it does.
Yeah. You know what I can do is a variant on the collector, and I can make a variant called like the obsessed, which is like the next logical step in collecting. Is you become that guy who has to have 3 of every comic book wrapped in different packagings, and
Yeah.
you'll do anything to get there, that sort of thing. I'll write it down tentatively for now. So let's take a look. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, and that is 10 total, plus I've got obsessive on there. Now, if you do happen to come across anything that sparks your interest while we're not talking, please feel free to send me a message on this video's comments or just across Facebook, whatever works for you.
Yeah. The only thing I'm not seeing that's also coming to mind is there's no kind of huntsman or like
well, there's the Outlander, but I feel like the Outlander doesn't quite do justice for like a traditional, like just a village hunter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Not so much as that you're like a wild man, but like that's your life. You live your life in the wilds, like providing for people within cities, and you know. And
I
I
was
don't
gonna say,
think it really falls. I don't think it really falls under hermit either.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that Jarl DM put together a couple for his game that are specific with a Viking theme, and one of them is hunter. And I'll have to take a look at that. That's a good point because the Outlander does feel kind of a little bit more savage feeling. It's not necessarily like a you hunt for your village kind of deal.
Exactly. I mean, I'm thinking like Hansel and Gretel's father. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. That could be another interesting background, is be like a woodsman.
Yeah.
Pick out those iconic like NPCs of fairy tales. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers a good selection and gives me some stuff to build up and have some new content. Let's see if there's anything else we can do. That is pretty much it for now. I will probably make a class for the game as well. If I don't want to start thinking about that because that could get really complicated really fast. I may do another hangout and kind of seed ideas with people, and hopefully I can get a few more people in here to get some more ideas from.
Right.
But
it's also really late.
I was gonna say for me it's actually not bad, but I forgot that some of our group is like over in Europe, and then others are kind of even
like
different
12:30
categories. Right. I was gonna say I'm Central, so I'm 11:30. So
see, that's not so bad. That's not so bad.
I was gonna say I may seed my my interest post a little earlier than one day before, like I did this time. That way I can try and get a few more people in.
Yeah.
But if you do happen to think of an idea of like a class or something that doesn't exist that you would like to see, it's especially good for somebody coming from Pathfinder, because Pathfinder you have something around the number of 160 options by now.
Yeah.
For every class. It's crazy over there in Pathfinder. My favorite one in Pathfinder is right now is the Brawler, because it's such a cinematic class.
Okay,
if you haven't played it, it's so fun.
No, I mean, you gotta remember, I might sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I have literally played and been in the community as a whole for about a month.
Okay.
Like, I knew nothing a month ago of a tabletop.
Well, you're getting into it the right way, just kind of talking to people, so that's perfect.
Well, I came in actually more to listen. I didn't want to I was like, didn't want to ruin anybody's thought process. I really just wanted to learn because, like I said, I got the DM book in front of me and I'm planning like this big, one-shot thing. And I kind of just wanted to absorb information. I love just absorbing information. But it ended up being really fun and inspiring. So I think I got what I wanted out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it before. If you do happen to want any help or anything like that, I do have time to help, but I don't necessarily have time to play. As strange as that sounds, I can make time during hours that you might not be awake, kind of a thing, for me to help you research things. But my schedule is kind of filling up right now, and I mentioned it before, but I'm going to be planning a one-shot series of my own, and I'm going to see the idea pretty soon here.
Yeah.
Just to kind of let everybody know inside the video, because I've been talking about it with some people already, is I'm going to do a mech style game.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that. Well, right now, I want to delve into this Dungeon Master's Guide. I want to delve into this player book. I want to, get really familiar, because I know the System 5e to a degree, but I don't know it in and out. You know what I mean? So I want to, I'm one of those people, I do my own research, and then I ask a lot of questions.
Totally fine. But I do it the same way.
I have a really weird schedule. My fiance works the rotating shifts of day shift and night shift. So it's like sometimes I'm up till 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, just waking up. So if we could find a weird time space, once I get through this, that'd be awesome. I know May 7th I'm going to Florida for. Do you know League of Legends?
I do. I don't play.
I'm going to see the professionals play on May 7th, and I'm super excited about that.
That was actually really cool when I used to work. I mentioned that I worked for Paizo. I used to do their events for PAX East and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the cool things, is going there and being able to play games and demo stuff super early. And me and a buddy of mine, we knew the guys who wrote Star Wars: The Old Republic, all the scripting for it. And so we would, every time we went to an event that had them there, we would be able to play all the demos and not have to wait in line. They'd just pull us over and let us use whatever computer they wanted.
Yeah.
We'd get drinks with them afterward, because we're all a bunch of people working the con together.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and shut down the live broadcast here. For anybody who wants to check out her games, Miss Chelsea, if you want to kind of talk about what you've got coming up.
Sure. I have 2 one-shot series. One-shots, I might run them multiple times. I might turn them into campaigns after the one-shots. But the first is revolving around the world of Braemar. And the story seed for that is basically you are gathered from a town square as a volunteer after an unknown entity has crashed through the fortress city of Mar. It is heavily based on Scottish influence, and is high fantasy. The second is Earth 1920s High Fantasy Global Pandemic. And basically in this, you're really not going to know too much about this, like what you're going to be doing, but the world you are in is in a post-pandemic state. For the better part of 10 years, a virus based loosely on tuberculosis has basically just crumbled society. You know, death has racked the world. You know, poverty and starvation is heavily, you know, influencing mankind in their decisions. Remnants of, you know, government are making things worse by, like I said, it's the 1920s. So here comes prohibition. So basically it's very, you know, high fantasy, you know, 1920s vibe going on.
Okay,
and those
perfect.
are two different one-shots that will probably happen, I'm going to say, at some point after May 9th. I'm going to post basically some info probably tomorrow night specifically.
All right, perfect. That sounds good. I will also be doing a one-shot series. If you guys can't read my screen, I'm Chris Wilhelm from Drop Dice. You can find me on Facebook by my name, and then YouTube by my icon there. But I'll be doing a one-shot, like I mentioned, for... I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was pointing to your logo, see? I was being all stylistic.
Now, I was going to say, I mentioned it earlier, I do plan on running a mech series. I have given access to a playtest set of rules for a game called Souls of Steel that probably will go on Kickstarter later this year. And I'm pretty excited about it. I like mech games in general, so we're going to try and do that. And hopefully I can get some buzz for the creator for her Kickstarter to go successful. Now, if you guys are interested in any of those games or playing anything else, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's a couple groups for you. The RPG Brigade for finding other videos like this, the Tabletop One-Shot group, which is going to be where her games are going to be hosted, and my games as well. My games will also go on the second group, which is the RPG W3 or Wild Wild West group. That is where the weird games go, is kind of the best way to describe it. Those are the games that you get to explore things that you wouldn't normally explore in kind of a more popular forum. Tend to be games that can push the envelope a little bit and give you a whole new experience. I say weird because that's kind of the best word I can use to describe it. It's not a negative thing by any stretch. Those guys are pretty awesome. If you want to see some of their content, check out SR2 Joker. His Gith game, which is actually premiering tonight, and probably why I didn't have too many people inside the chat with me today. So definitely check that stuff out, and you can kind of see the way that they play. All right, everybody, thank you for attending, and we'll see you at the table.